Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 52nd episode of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today we have another amazing guest. We've had two this week, so it's been really nice when I can get two in a row like I did this week, a guest on Tuesday and a guest on Wednesday. Don't normally do that, but sometimes when you just have great people that you want to talk to, you make those exemptions. So today I have another one of those great people, and his name is Dave Sanderson. Dave, how are you doing?
Teresa, I'm unbelievable. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Oh, absolutely. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to read you guys a little bit about Dave and tell you a little bit about, why he's on the show, what we're going to talk about. And then I'm just going to go right into questions. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to stick them in the comments section wherever you're joining us, be that on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. If you guys are joining us from YouTube, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit that notification button, let us know where you're joining us from, or at least I'll see that as well, and we'll keep going. So anyway, Dave Sanderson, he is an inspirational survivor, author, and nationally sought out leadership speaker. When US Airways Flight 1549, or what was known as the Miracle on the Hudson, ditched into the Hudson River on January 15, 2009, Dave Sanderson knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. As the last passenger off the back of the plane on that fateful day, he took responsibility for the well-being and safety of others. He risked his own life in the frigid water to help other passengers off the plane. But despite the hazards to himself, Dave thought only of helping others. He emerged from the wreckage that day and with a mission to encourage others to do the right thing. This profound experience changed his life, and today he travels the globe sharing his inspirational and motivational leadership messages to help people make a difference in how they do business and in how they live their lives. He's also been named one of Inc.com's top 100 leadership speakers. And today he travels the world to share his inspirational leadership lessons, raising over $14.8 million for the American Red Cross over the last 10 years through his talks. Welcome.
I'm honored to be with you, Teresa. Thank you very much.
To get the opportunity to talk to you. There's so much ground to cover, but the first thing I just want to talk about is a little bit about your upbringing and what sort of led you down the road to become an inspirational speaker. Where did it all begin?
Well, candidly, that wasn't my mission when I was young. I was, my goal actually was just to graduate college, get a really good job. But fortunately for me, my dad, when I got home from college, Teresa, he gave me 30 days to be out of the house.
Wow.
One thing I've learned about my dad, and I share, is he was a man of his word. When he said something, he said, "Your word is your bond." So in 30 days, I didn't have a job. So he helped me get my first job, which was a restaurant manager at Howard Johnson, which I knew nothing about restaurants and hotels.
Mm-hmm.
But that happened to be a great experience for me, because that actually got to me started getting me where I'm at. Because when I was a second assistant restaurant manager in Charlotte, North Carolina, that means I worked second and third shift. There was a gentleman and his wife that would come in every night to have coffee and ice cream. His name was Bill, and her name was Bonnie. And we would just talk. And over a course of a couple of months, I found out that he owned a number of different movie theaters and restaurants in the Carolinas. And he was known as the Sam Walton of Charlotte. But I was actually talking to somebody who was an entrepreneur who had a mindset of how to grow businesses. But really what happened was my shift, and where it really got to me where I'm at was December 24th, 1984, when he actually came to the restaurant early. He wanted to show me what he got his wife Bonnie for Christmas. It was a brand new blue Corvette. And I'd never seen a Corvette. I couldn't even spell Corvette. He threw me the keys and said, "Jump in, we're going to take a spin." And he said, "Make sure it's pointing the right direction, because it's going to go." So we went up and down Woodlawn Road here in Charlotte. I came back and said, "Bill, Bonnie's going to dig this, man. She's going to love it." And he looked me in the eye. Tracy said, "You need one of these." I said, "Bill, I'm making $13,000 a year. I can barely afford my rent." He goes, "That's your problem. It's your mindset." He said, "Can I teach you the mindset of success, what it takes to be a success?" Now, I had nothing to lose. So for the next 13 years, Teresa, he was actually teaching me this mindset that he grew up with and how he grew his life and his business, which was a great gift to me. I had a mentor that, candidly, I never thought. He was 77 years old when it started. But in 1997 is when things started clicking, because he actually called me to his office here in Charlotte. He told me two things that night. He said, I got lung cancer. Now, he smoked 2 packs of unfiltered Camels a day, starting back in the 20s. So, it's going to happen. But he also he went over his desk and pulled out these handwritten notes. He said, I want to give these to you. I said, what are they? He goes, these are the notes I actually wrote down when I met with my mentor in 1929. This is what the mindset of success I've been teaching. But I want to give these to you. But you got to promise me one thing. I said, what? He goes, do not let it die with you. He passed away in September of 1997. And I didn't do anything with those notes. I put them away, and I went on. But what's amazing about that is when one mentor exits, another came in. And shortly, about 4 or 5 months after that was when Tony Robbins asked me to be his assistant head of security and later head of security. And I also had a new mentor who could teach me distinction. So that was really the genesis of how I got to where I'm starting to go, because on January 15, 2009, all these things that I learned from all those years of being with him and being with Tony and all this helped me not only survive that day, but really put me in the mindset of how to not only survive, but help other people and keep my composure while all hell is breaking loose. And you've been in the military, when all stuff starts breaking loose, people can start losing their heads.
They do.
But
absolutely
that's what actually started my genesis and how I am where I am today.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So how often would you see this gentleman, the one who became your first mentor? Like, how did this relationship develop, and what did it look like day to day?
Yeah, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that question. When I was still in Charlotte, I would see him pretty much every weekday night when he was there with Bonnie. But then I got started getting transferred because I got promoted. And so I would check in with him when I came back to Charlotte because my fiance was in Charlotte. So I had a reason to come back. We would meet then. We would meet when I come back. We'd go out to lunch or go out to dinner. But, he had this place called Barbecue Place down the street, right, where people hung out. And so, Bill was he was very accommodating to me. People ask me, I write my book From Turmoil to Triumph. People say, why do you think he picked you? And I don't know. But I thought, he saw something in me. I think he saw something in me that his world, his legacy would not die if he left it with somebody who would take the ball and run with it.
That's incredible.
I think that's the biggest gift of my life. So I think that's what my book's about. Everybody needs a mentor. Everybody's got to have a mentor.
We do. And it's so hard to find mentors that will breathe that kind of perspective into your life, because we tend to, human nature, we tend to hang out with like. So if we're in a dark place, the only people we think that can relate to us in that dark place is other people who are in that same dark place. And so it takes a lot to take yourself out of that place and put yourself in a place with somebody that you're like, I want to be like said person. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of humility to do that. Did you feel when you were meeting with him that there were times that you're like, man, I'm just almost like an imposter. Like, I'm never going to measure up to the stuff he's telling me. Like,
yeah, that's, once again, that's a great distinction. One of the things that I learned later on, and it actually was true, I'm going to answer the question a different way, was when I was with Tony, because he always talked to me about proximity is power. Proximity is power. You got to be around what you want to be. And
my friend Chase said the same thing. Yep.
Yeah, and I was around him, and I don't think I ever had all, but I was like, this guy has done something that I've never been around.
Right.
And I was like, what's the secret sauce?
Yeah.
Why am I a restaurant manager and this guy has got, he's got, movie theaters and restaurants all over the place. And he was starting to, he was in his later years, but it's like, he put the work in back in the 20s and 30s, right, during the Depression. And that was really great. I was in awe of that because he did something during the Depression and World War II when life was really tough, and he had perseverance. He had the mindset. And I said, you know what, if I could just grasp a little bit of that, just a little bit. And all of a sudden I did. I changed into sales, Teresa, and all of a sudden I became the top sales producer in every place I went. Just because of the mindset that I was developing by being around in proximity.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And that's a great first start, because there are many people, I think, that are sort of stuck in the grind, right? They're stuck in that 9 to 5, and they want to do the stuff that you talk about, the entrepreneurship and the business stuff. And of course, there's tons of people on LinkedIn that want to, follow their passion and start this amazing business. Yep. But then there's also the day-to-day realities of, there's bills to pay, there's children to feed, there's these things. And so where do you find that time to really dive into that personal growth and development when you are just struggling day to day to just make ends meet.
I think, one of the things, and this is not new stuff, but one of the things that I did and I still do to today, and I think it's part of the secret sauce, you can pick up a book and read. You can read how others got to where they're at. And I'll give you an example. In fact, I actually listen to books. I listen to like 2 books a week right now instead of read, because it's less easier for me as I travel.
Sure.
But one of the things that he taught me, and this is one of the things I talk about when I talk, is he had his kitchen roundtable, where these were these movers and shakers in Charlotte. But when I took the same concept and made it a virtual roundtable, where I can go in, I'm like, all the areas of my life, I have somebody. So that's like for leadership. I think Abraham Lincoln was one of the greatest leaders, if not the greatest leader in history of the United States, for what he did. So, but now with the internet, Teresa, you can go out and research, you can learn, you can read his book, you can read books about him, and you can get so involved with these people's lives because there's so much information. So when you have an issue, like if I have a question or an issue about finances, I go to my finance guy, right? Or I have a spiritual question. So I think reading or listening to books and building your own virtual roundtable of all these great people in certain areas of your life, it elevates you, and it doesn't cost that much. Heck, like someone told me years ago, the library is free.
Right. And I think too, it's also, just taking some small pieces of your day and just part of your time to build a skill. That's kind of what I'm doing with podcasting.
Right.
I'm building it very, very slowly and just steadily. And I'm staying consistent about it, even when I'm in the middle of a move or even when I'm on military leave. It doesn't matter. I still do these shows consistently because I know that being able to build a skill set in interviewing and having these, what I feel are very important conversations, is something that it isn't going to atrophy on me. It's going to be something that I would love to think that I can continue to do regardless of if I'm in the military, if I'm traveling or whatever. And so I think what you're talking about was just this way that you sort of gradually started to build it, but it didn't really come to that point where you were ready to branch off and now be an inspirational speaker and write 3 books and do all these other things, because I don't think there was a catalyst, right? There wasn't this something that was like, oh my gosh, something has to change. So can you tell me a little bit about what I wrote about in what you said to me in the bio and how that started?
Well, I think a lot of people may have a lot of shoulds in their life, and it's that moment you make it a must. And what really happened to me, it was shortly after the miracle on the Hudson. And it actually started that night, because the only person, here's a little backstory that not a lot of people know. The only person that called me in the hospital after the plane crash was Tony Robbins.
Wow.
My company didn't call me. I finally called my wife later, but when he talked to me, we were talking 15, 20 minutes, he said, the last thing he said is, when you get to LA, call me. So I was going to go on these shows, Bonnie Hunt and Ellen and all these shows. I was doing all this stuff, right? So I get to LA early, and he's in Palm Springs, so I called him. And he was coaching me on what to expect. And he said, now's your time. Now's your time, right? And he kept saying that to me. Because I always would have excuses, Teresa. I mean,
I bet.
I don't have enough money. I can't do this. I can't do that. And one of the things you don't do to Tony is give him excuses. There's no excuses.
Yes.
So he finds that this is your time. So he was coaching me this whole time on how and to do this in a way that I could impact people's lives and have, always. And the one thing he kept telling me, and this is one thing I always stress, I tell people this. He said, always stay humble. Always stay humble. So everything I try to do is around humility, is because, I'm blessed to be here. I look at this. I'm very blessed to be here. Yes, a lot of things had to go right that day, but they did. So yeah, that's sort of how this sort of catalyst really began. Is, he was encouraging me to do it, live my mission, and live, being able to add value to other people's lives first.
And if I understand correctly, you worked your way up as director of security for Tony Robbins, but this was kind of like a side hustle for you. This wasn't your full-time job. This was just something, right? In fact, I want to say you were almost like you were volunteering at times, and this was just something you were doing. And then you got to know his whole team, and you got integrated with their processes. So what an invaluable experience.
Well, I tell you, it was an amazing experience, Teresa. What happened? Tell you the backstory. I was volunteering, like you said, paying my own way, but I wanted to be around and learn, right? That way I could be around the environment because proximity is power.
Right.
But one night, it was late one night, we were in Kona, Hawaii, right? And I was putting down brochures on seats, like, just being one of the guys. And all of a sudden, his former wife was cornered with a couple people that I'm sure they didn't have malintent. They just wanted to talk. But I could tell she's a little uncomfortable, right?
Right.
So I just went up to her and said, Mr. Robbins, agent in the back. That's all I said. And so I walked her back. She says, you handled that pretty well. I said, well, thank you. She goes, would you like to be on the security team? And I said, it's a lot better than handing out brochures. So she put me in the green room for 1 week. I sat in a chair. I did not move for 1 week, but I was around the energy.
Yeah.
And I was hearing all this stuff, right? I'm like, whoa, I'm getting a college education in 1 week. And I said, all of a sudden, the thing about it was he got certainty with me because I always had his back. Loyalty.
I felt the same way when I hung out with Chase Hughes. He's a friend of mine from my enlisted days, and he's now a body language expert, and he's been on Dr. Phil, and he's, a coach and all these things. And it was the same. He told me the exact same thing that you're saying. He told me when he got out as a first class petty officer, and he said he came like this close. He lives here in Chesapeake, Virginia, and he came super close to getting a job at the shipyard, and he was going to just get his job. But he's always been just fascinated by body language and this and that. And he'd been working on this book forever. And he started, establishing a business and just building this brand very slowly and teaching interrogation techniques and this and that. And then his book exploded on Amazon, his self-published book. And that became the launching point for him to interact with all these other body language experts. Now the guy's got a YouTube channel with 500,000 subscribers, and The rest is history. And he said the exact same thing you said about proximity is power. He said that one of the things he did when he just got out of the Navy, because he retired as a chief, is that he joined a country club. And I said, you joined a country club? He goes, because my Navy guys, none of them, that's not the environment that I would ever be exposed to the kinds of people that I wanted to be exposed to. And I wanted to change my social circle. And he said, I knew it was going to be a big expense. I knew it was going to be a lot of money. He said, but I wanted to be around a different caliber of people.
That's right.
And he did. And so, it really goes to show you that networking, and then, like you say, though, producing. Like, Dave, you didn't just go to these conferences and take and listen and absorb. You were like, okay, no, I'm going to be a foot soldier, and I'm going to pass out brochures, and I'm going to do the work. And then people are going to see that I'm not just there for, the glory.
Be a taker, right? Mm-hmm. It's always about giving first. Always about giving first. And
yeah,
you're exactly right. So thank you for letting me open that little story I don't talk about much. Thank you.
No, I'm honored to hear all of your stories. In fact, everybody, this is the book, his first book, which is Moments Matter, how one defining moment can create a lifetime of purpose. And it really is a wonderful book because it goes into the story of the miracle on the Hudson, but then it goes into a lot of detail about kind of how each part of the story led to a bigger lesson, like the way the American Red Cross came through and how that led to the work that you're still doing with them today, or the counselors that I think it was, I want to say American Airlines. Yes, American Airlines.
US Airways.
I'm sorry, US Airways, how they came through and provided so much support and the timeline of how many minutes elapsed between when the aircraft, between they went down, the aircraft crashed and help arrived. And and the Port Authority, that was another one. I mean, gosh, what a amazing story of all these organizations that came together to enable. I mean, it's such a good news story. And when we hear so much bad news, and so for you to be able to share that is very meaningful.
Well, thank you. I think that's what happened that day. I think the world needed a good story.
Right.
We were in 2009, we were in recession, right? There's a lot of stuff not going really well. And all of a sudden, and I tell people, I said, one of the things that really has always sort of amazed me is this happened in New York City, the business media center in the world, at rush hour, when everybody's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The timing was unbelievable timing to have this happen.
Yeah, it is one of those just amazing stories. And if I'm not mistaken, the captain Soley, didn't he become a motivational speaker, and didn't this impact his life in a profound way as well?
It changed his whole life and his career. And of course, now he's an ambassador. So I don't think he's speaking as much because he's now doing the work of the government, like as you do.
Oh, really?
So,
He's a state ambassador? I did not know that.
He's in charge of, I guess, the United States flight protocols, the safety. So, yeah, he was made an ambassador. So yeah, I haven't seen him on the speaking tour lately because I guess he's doing whatever he's doing there. So,
right.
He did a tremendous job, and I'll be forever grateful.
Absolutely. So you have this profound experience. I'm going to kind of keep going down the timeline. Okay. And is this where right around the time that you said, okay, I'm going to start building a business and kind of go from there?
Yeah, I was tinkering at that point, right? I was speaking, I was doing this, a little bit of that. I hadn't written a book yet, but I tell you exactly I can tell you the moment it happened. I mean, basically, you look over my right shoulder. It happened right here because it was Thanksgiving Day, and in 2013, and I was in here. I was still working for my company, and I was working on Thanksgiving while everybody else was having turkey, and I couldn't get any help. And all of a sudden, Teresa, I picked up the phone. I threw it across the room. I said, "What am I doing? What am I doing? This is so painful that I'm not celebrating. Everybody else is, and I'm doing all the work for everybody else. So something has to change."
Yeah.
And so that changed for me on February 1st, 2014. I said, no, enough. That's when I started building my business at that point in time, intentionally building my business to what I needed to do and how to build it up. So yes, it took a moment like that for me to say, you know what, something's wrong.
Right. And you had been wanting to do this for so long, and it finally would just kind of hit that point where you're like, all right, I'm just going to make this happen. And it's going to be hard. It's risky, and it's walking into the unknown, but I'm just going to do it.
I had to sell my wife. That was the biggest sales job I ever done, is get my wife to buy into that because she likes healthcare, right?
Oh, sure. And stability. Yeah. Who doesn't?
That's right. She wants certainty, right? And all of a sudden I'm paying $1,800 a year for healthcare. A month for healthcare, right? For Obamacare. Right.
And you're building a brand, and you're building a personal brand, which I think is also just very scary because all your success depends on your personality and what you bring and what your words bring, everything that you can do to build a coalition. And so how did you get started? You wrote your book, and then you started, you built your website, you started your business, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to become a professional speaker. How did you start with, like, Toastmasters, or start small, or what did you do?
I'll tell you exactly what I did. And once again, I took Tony's advice. I mean, if nothing comes through today but these people give you wisdom, right? You can't buy wisdom. You can't.
No, you can't.
He told me, he said, listen, don't take a cent to do what you're doing until you feel it. It's in your heart. You can speak from your heart. You don't take any notes. And so the first 70 events that I did, Teresa, I didn't take one penny. Did not take one penny. Some people gave me expenses, which was nice, but I knew it so well. It's in my heart and my body. So when I walk on stage and when I'm talking to people, it's there. I'm right with them. And that's the moment where it starts shifting for me. And the Red Cross was a great help because I've done over 180 events for the Red Cross, which has helped me not only help them, but help me get around, because people who are on boards of directors at Red Cross, like your friend, you were talking about your friend, people of influence.
Right. I see. So you did the first speeches just using your network of people that you knew in like the nonprofit world, or the people that you had surrounded yourself with, and just became a speaker. And then from that point, you just kept doing it and doing it and doing it.
Yeah, I started getting, I was picked up by a couple speaking agencies, right? And that was very nice because I didn't even know what they were. People actually pay me, right? And they'll do all the work, and I'll show up.
Yeah.
That was wow. But no, I think one of the other strategies I did is I still do it today, is I hired an executive assistant. So they could focus on the things I did a lot like to do, and I could focus on delivering and
on
building
the details,
and writing. And that was probably one of the key moments when I got Tammy. Unfortunately, Tammy wanted to go get married and left me, but that's okay. People want to get married and go get I appreciate it. But that was a turning point for me, because now I had somebody who could handle all this stuff, and I could focus on the delivering content and value to people.
I hear you, Dave. Like, if I never had to do another graphic, or if I never had to do another, promos on social media. I mean, those are just, they're part of they're painful. Yeah. Because they're the tactics and they're the nitnoid details, and they're not the fun part, like speaker prep. Like, I love like just getting into people's stories and, reading the books and doing that part of podcasting. And, when you're somebody like Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, of course, you've got people, or, they've got people to do all that stuff. Right. But when you're starting off like I am, you do everything yourself initially. So
you have a wingman, though. You get a wingman.
Well, I do have a technical, like I said, I do have a husband who is amazingly gracious, helping me set up. And, over the last year or so that I've been doing this, I've now gotten a better camera. I've gotten a better microphone and little things like that. But so tell me a little bit about, you wrote this first book and you got your speaking career going. And then you wrote more of a faith-based book, I think I saw on Amazon. So tell me a little bit about that. Well,
yeah, and that was interesting because I don't talk about that book a lot. But, I have a belief there's a higher being.
Yep.
And I believe that being is over you and is directing you to where he or she wants you to be. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this book primarily just to sort of give some lessons about, where, I give you example where it really came from. I was with my mentor, Don, and I was writing Moments Matter at that point in time. And I shared him these notes from Bill. I said, Don, I feel like an idiot. I shared these notes. He goes, God doesn't give you the lesson until you're ready. And that's where that came from. It's like, because, back in 1997, Teresa, I wasn't ready.
Right. Yep.
Yep. So at that point, he said, you're ready. And that was the point. I wrote Moments Matter. Then I wrote this. And all this thing started coming together because, I had a bigger faith that, what, if I believe, I can focus, I can do the things I need to do. And I focus on serving other people first, becoming a servant leader. Then the whole switch came on. That's when everything started changing for me.
I love it. And so you write that book, and you talk a lot about your faith even in this book. And I'm very welcoming of people talking about faith, because I believe that spirituality is a huge part of everyone's life. Whether or not they have religion, that's one thing. But I think spirituality is almost like something different. It's this belief in, like, the higher, something higher than yourself, that kind of thing. And you're sort of here for a higher purpose, or a more, you're trying to find this, whatever this ultimate meaning is, and what you were meant to do in life. Right. And so you write that book, and then how did From Turmoil to Triumph? What was like, okay, I'm going to write a third book now. Why?
Well, it actually started during COVID. And it was the genesis. I was thinking of things, and I was thinking about what's my next venture.
Right.
And then all of a sudden COVID hits. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm by myself in my office here. What am I going to do? Right. Mm-hmm. But I started writing. But what really came together for me, Teresa, was this. Why this book came together was what I realized, and it came out of a request that I got from a principal of a high school, my high school, actually. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? I told the kids this. The last year, which now is 2 years, was not just about COVID. It was also about social justice questions, police, the election that kept going on, earthquakes, and all this turmoil started stacking on people. Mm-hmm. And I said, I figured out a strategy, because through the plane crashes. One of the questions I get a lot about the plane crash is, why did so many other people go into depression and PTSD and you didn't? Mm-hmm. And that question came to me from somebody who wanted to interview me for AARP magazine. And I was like, I don't know. He goes, we're doing it. There's two colleges, university has done a study on you. UNC Charlotte and North Dakota State it's called PTGS, post-traumatic growth syndrome.
Right.
And the question is, why do some people grow and some other people go the different directions?
That's a great question.
So I did this article for AARP, and all of a sudden exploded. And I was asked to do a TED Talk on it. So I did a TED Talk on this and shared the strategies that I used to grow from a traumatic life event instead of going into depression. And that all of a sudden I started talking about that from turmoil to triumph. It's like, okay, there are strategies, there are ways, and a lot of it is these lessons that Bill taught me, right? Yeah, it really are there. But what the real revelation is this: as I was writing this, I was crying every time I was writing a chapter. And the reason I was is what I realized is I learned the same things from Bill that my mother taught me when I was a kid. I wasn't listening to her.
Yeah.
And I was too close. So she was also trying to help me maneuver through life, right? These lessons. So that's why this book came about, is because everything was stacking on people. So many people were depressed. The suicide rates up. You know, I mean, it was just, people were coming to me all the time. I was getting phone calls from people say, "Can you help this person that's locked in the cabin in Northern Ontario?" I'm like, I don't know. And I start talking about this. Also, I start connecting the dots for people. And that was what happened. That's what this book's about. I helped connect the dots, and I held it back because this thing was ready to go last November. But my team implored me, Teresa, you got to write about the Navy SEAL swim. That is, so if you look at this book, chapter 13 is called The Real Lesson. And the real lesson for the last 13 years came in the river. And that's why I held it back. And I've written about this whole story. And that's why, as you know, Suzanne was with me. And there was a moment that the light went on. And that was the whole lesson that I was trying to learn. But I needed to be someplace where I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Somebody that I could trust.
Correct.
I could have that one-on-one, right? And Suzanne happened to be that person.
I will tell you that processing trauma is so important and is so neglected in our society. I mean, I even had I wouldn't call it, I hate to use the word traumatic because maybe that's extreme, but I had kind of a not so great experience like the last 3 weeks I was in Germany. And it really was hard for me to process what had happened and why a particular relationship didn't go as the way I had hoped it would. But man, I have some amazing close friends at the moment. Like I have this girl, Tia, and, you know, of course, Suzanne, and I have a couple others. And to be able to just, and this is the same thing as therapy, to be able to just talk to somebody you trust and kind of get meaning out of what happened and why things turned out the way they did, or what to take away from it, is so important. And I think sometimes instead of processing a negative experience or a perceived negative experience, we just bury it and we stuff it away. And then what happens is the same exact situations pop up over and over again. And then they just remind us of that original scar. They stack. And then we never, but just being able to talk through and laugh about it now. And, you know, I don't even have the same, I was told this to my husband the other day. I'm like, I don't even think about it anymore. And it doesn't even hurt me when I talk through it. But the first, couple weeks I was back, I was just so just obsessing over it and thinking about it all the time. And I thought, wow, like it makes such a difference to have trusted people you can talk about things to.
Yep.
And
exactly. You got to have, and we talked about this when we came on, you got to have a wingman. You got to have, I've had a couple wingmen, right? That you have solemn trust, right? And you can just have a conversation and just be yourself.
Right.
And just, I think that's, I didn't have that for a long time. I didn't have that for a long time. So I was stacking inside so much of me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fortunately, I figured this thing out. And I agree with you. I think that, and that's why this book came out a couple of weeks ago, because I wanted to hold back to write that story of really how you really turn turmoil into triumph. All these things I talk about are great, but there's one thing that changes everything, and that's what happened in the river. And I tell you, it was very impactful.
I look forward to reading the story. I know Suzanne said that she helped you in terms of the swimming and some other things. She told me a little bit about the story, but she wouldn't tell me much. She's like, just ask Dave about it. And I almost don't want to. I want people to read the book and get the story for themselves about how going back there impacted you and what you took away from it. That's really beautiful that you share things like that. And it's indicative of the fact that now that this is your purpose. And again, my friend Vicky, who joins a lot of my calls, so thank you very much, Vicky. She says, how does one know their purpose? I feel like I'm waiting on someone to tap me on their shoulder to tell me.
Yeah, you ask yourself questions. And one of the ways I did it is I learned, and I talk about this in my talk, is what's your primary question? And people say, what's the primary question? It's the question you ask yourself when you're so under stress all the time. And most people's primary question, Teresa, would be like, And mine used to be like, why does this always happen to me?
Oh, I do the same thing. Oh my gosh, poor me.
I can't get across the 5-yard line. What's going on, right?
Yes.
And all of a sudden, I learned I had to reframe that. So now, how can I add even more value and enjoy the process? And that's the question I go to. So that's helped me develop my mission and purpose. Because now, I've said it probably 5 or 6 times about adding value. That's ingrained. So I think it starts with asking, number one, getting a primary question that empowers you instead of always demoralizes you.
Right.
And I'll tell you, 95% of the people in this world have one that demoralizes them all the time.
Right. Like Vicky says here, mine is, what am I doing wrong? Instead of saying, what am I doing right? What could I be doing? What can I be doing and enjoy the process? What could I? Yeah.
And enjoy the process it's a great way to do it, because if you can do it, but if you're not enjoying it, it's still not adding value to you and somebody else. But if you enjoy it, and now you got a winning combination.
Yeah, that's how I feel about podcasting right now, is the fact that I enjoy the process, even though it's work. And sometimes I think the hardest part for me is figuring out which guests to have on and when to put them on, and the timing, and trying to balance that with everything that with all my day to day is incredibly hard sometimes. But I'm so passionate about it. And this is why, because I can have conversations like this with you, Dave. I mean, there's just something amazing about being able to add that value to your life. And Suzanne Henson, she's a beautiful person that I'd love to introduce you to someday. She was actually in the Pentagon when the attack on 9/11 happened. And she wrote an amazing story on her blog about it on the anniversary of 9/11. I'll have to send you the link after the show. It's probably one of the, Dave, it's one of the best depictions I've read about that event and that place in history. And she says here, so true, stacking trauma never works and leads to more and more pain. Got to process that stuff and let it go. And she's absolutely right. And so many people don't, because it's shameful, and people think there's so much shame. And it's so funny, because as you age, Dave, you go, God, everybody has this stuff.
Well, it's interesting you say that. And she says, her name's Susan, right?
Yes.
But she said that because people used to ask me, so how did you get through this stuff, right? And I said, one of the things I learned is that she said it, and that's what triggered it. You got to get it out of your body. And so I just start speaking. And speaking gets it out of your body.
It does.
It's out. Or people hold it in, right? And it stacks. So that's why I started speaking at churches, Red Cross, Chamber of Commerce, anybody who wanted me to come, I was showing up, right?
Yeah.
So because I could get it out of my body, where other people, I know other passengers are still don't fly. They don't get back on a plane. They haven't processed because they just keep it right here.
Well, interesting, because I felt the same way about, I've had a couple duty stations that were really, really hard. And when I wrote about them, or I just blogged about them, or I did an article, and you can, and this is another thing I want to tell people, and I'll talk about this in a storytelling panel I have next week at the Joint Women's Leadership Symposium, but you don't have to say people's names. You don't have to, you can, edit the details a little bit. You can tell the story in a way. I think people are so afraid to share their stories because, and I was too, that, oh my God, I'm going to offend somebody. I'm going to hurt someone. So that's another question for you, Dave. How did you share these stories, even about like Howard Johnson and some of the things there about, okay, you're going to make this pivot. How do you do that in a way that doesn't, throw other people under the bus and make it your story?
Well, I'll give you a little story that helped me do that. Where I'm standing right now. I was sitting where I'm standing right now. I got a phone call from my wife. A couple of our neighbors needed some help getting their TV on. And now, I'm pretty good at getting TVs on. Plus, these are two older ladies. And I grew up, Teresa, in a place in Southern Ohio where you took care of your elderly folks, right? You just took care of them. So I went down there and got the TV fixed, Teresa, and that was no big deal. And they asked me if I could stay for milk and cookies. Now, I love milk and cookies, right? Who doesn't? Especially from a couple older ladies you could probably bake pretty well, right? So I'm all in, right? So I'm in these things down south, as you probably call parlors. I went into their parlor, and they had all these books about World War II on their table. I was like, really? Like, woo, this is cool. I've never seen this.
Right.
When they came out with milk and cookies, I said, hey, where'd you get these books? And they both looked at me, Teresa, rolled their sleeves up and showed me the numbers and letters down their arm. They survived a concentration camp.
Wow.
They were in those books. Their family was in those books. And I begged them to tell me this story. So for 2+ hours, they told me the story how they survived
Mm-hmm.
the concentration camp. And I came back blown away. That's how I got the title Moments Matter, because I came back and said, this is it. They made all their moments in their life matter by learning about telling stories. I never said their names. People around here would know who they are, right? But I never said their names. But you can tell a story in a way that, you know, that it's so impactful to you that you get, people feel you.
Right.
Because
they do.
think about it, everybody processes differently, as you know. It's either auditory, visually, or kinesthetically. And the greatest people who can tell a story hit all three.
I never thought about that.
And if you hit, because you don't know exactly where somebody's at it right now, I can pretty quickly identify what modality they're in. So when I tell stories and I do this, I don't never mention people's names unless they give me permission. But I hit all three modalities.
Yeah.
You know, and I do that when I go on. So yes, so that story helped me start really figuring this thing. I never tell these ladies' names, but it's had so much impact on me. I said, you know what? There's so many things going on in the world like that. If we all can just share, everybody's got stories.
We all do. That's what the ladies at the movers ladies who came over today. Oh my God. One of them grew up in the 60s, and she told me this amazing story about how she went to a school because of segregation, and they started to desegregate the schools. And she was the one black lady at the 10 black people at an all white school, and someone used the N-word her first day, and she'd been taught to fight, and she beat the crap out of the kid. And in the end, she eventually became friends with the kid, and then eventually became a pallbearer for her family's funeral.
Yep.
And it was just it had everything you're talking about. It was this great story. And afterwards, my friend Tia, she was over here today too, helping, and she said, you got to have that lady on your show. And I was like, I know. Yeah. I mean, it reminded me that we just all have these just glorious stories of redemption and hope and just wonderful memories that really can provide joy and lessons learned to other people. So we all need to get out there and share our stories. It doesn't always have to be in a public way like what you're doing or what I'm doing, but I believe that being able to share your truth and your story with a trust, like you said, a wingman, it's so important, so important. So I wish you all the best. And I think that, you're just going to continue to do, like, what's next for you now? You got the book out. Tell me a little bit about what you got going on.
Well, I launched my magazine last week. It's called Moments Matter. You go on my website, which I just launched yesterday. Thank you. My new website's launched. It's out there. So if anybody wants a free copy of my magazine, Moments Matter, I'm really proud of this. It's a way for me to communicate in a different modality. They can get a free digital version. Please go check it out. I really appreciate that. It's a quarterly magazine, but the next thing I'm going to be really doing is going back internationally. Over COVID, that sort of stopped pretty quick.
Sure.
So hopefully, if you're in England, I'm going to England here in about 5 or 6 months.
Well, then we will definitely keep in touch, and I'd love to see you while you're out there.
So that's what we got going on. We're just building this little by little, and it's I'm just honored to be able to do things like this with you and get my message out in a way that's hopefully impacts somebody's life.
Well, I love what you're doing, Dave. And, you and a few others who are in the coaching / inspirational speaking genre have really inspired me that this is a really wonderful way to share your stories with other people and give them strength and hope and courage. And, I look forward to keeping in touch with you. This has been an amazing conversation. If anyone wants to follow more about Dave, like I said, I've linked to his show notes in the end. And I think I'm going to close out here, but I will meet you backstage. Anything else I should have asked you that I didn't, or anything you want to add?
We don't have time, but I was first say I'm so glad that Suzanne invited me to her retirement because I got to meet people like you, and it never would have happened unless she and I became friends and swam in the river. So it's I want to thank Suzanne for making sure that this happens for you and I. I just wish blessings on you and safe travels, uneventful travels. I always like to say for people, right? But I look forward to staying in touch with you, and anything I can do to help you or your audience, all they got to do is ping me on my email.
Awesome, Dave. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you so much to Suzanne Lesko. We've been friends for, like 10 years, but in the last couple of years, we've gotten a lot closer. And it was such an honor to be at her retirement ceremony. So I will meet you backstage. I'm going to go to full screen real quick. I want to thank all of you for joining me tonight. It's going to be some time, I think, before I can do another show. I've got movers coming tomorrow, and then we've got next week. I'll be at the Joint Women's Leadership Symposium that is taking place in Norfolk, Virginia, on Monday and Tuesday of next week. So I will be very busy with a in-person conference. It's been a while since I've done one of those. And then rest of the month, I've got some travel, and you'll see my travels and some other things on social media. But for now, I'll probably take maybe a couple weeks off from podcasting and then get back into it. Probably I'm guessing about late July, I'll probably have another show. But with that, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great week, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye now.